My name is Lena Carter. I'm 29 years old, and last week, my family told me to throw out my best friend, my only roommate, so my father's daughter from his affair could move in. They said it like it was nothing, like my life, my home, my choices didn't matter. I stared across the dinner table, the silverware shaking in my hand, while my dad smirked and my stepsister blinked at me with wide eyes. But what they didn't know was this wasn't the first time they tried to erase me. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family, you'll want to hear this. I grew up in a house that always smelled faintly of bleach and cheap perfume. My mother Elise used to scrub the counters until her knuckles were raw, as if a clean kitchen could erase the filth of betrayal. I didn't understand it at the time. I was only 14 when the truth exploded into our lives. I remember the night like it's carved into my bones. The rain was hammering against the windows, and my father's voice carried over the storm, low, defensive, sharp as glass. My mother was on her knees in the living room begging him not to leave. Her long hair clung to her cheeks wet with tears. My brother Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, fists balled tight, while I pressed my back against the wall, praying they wouldn't notice me. That was the night I learned my dad had another daughter, a baby girl with another woman, Clara, one of his employees. Mom knew her, had even invited her to family barbecues once, and all that time Clara had been carrying my father's secret inside her. The images that haunt me most aren't of Clara or the baby, though. They're of my mother, her forehead pressed to the carpet, whispering, "Please, Mark, please don't leave us. I'll forgive you. I'll forgive everything." Her voice broke on that word. Forgive. Forgiveness was a currency my family always demanded from me, but never gave back. After that night, our home was never the same. My father didn't leave. He stayed triumphant, in a way smirking at the dinner table like he had won a war, and Mom, my strong, proud mother, became a ghost of herself. She cooked more, cleaned, more, dressed nicer, anything to keep him from walking out again. Ethan and I reacted differently. He refused to speak to Dad for a year, throwing plates when he couldn't hold it in anymore. I, on the other hand, turned to silence. My silence was my weapon. I stopped meeting my father's eyes. I stopped asking him for rides to school or for help with my math homework. To me, he was just a shadow sitting in a chair at the head of the table. But silence doesn't mean peace. It festers. One Christmas, about a year after The Secret came out, Clara and the baby Maya showed up at our house. The tree lights glowed red and green, blinking against the living room walls. Mom had baked her famous cinnamon rolls, the smell wrapping around us like a blanket. But when Clara stepped inside, holding Maya, that blanket turned to suffocation. "Say hello to your sister," Dad ordered. I looked at the baby's chubby face, the way her tiny fingers gripped Clara's sweater, and all I felt was rage. Rage at my father for planting this bomb in our lives. Rage at Clara for smiling so sweetly as if she hadn't broken us. Rage at my mother for standing there, smiling back, pretending everything was fine. I didn't say hello. I walked out into the snow, barefoot, my toes going numb as the cold bit into me. I remember the crunch under my feet, the way the stars looked blurred through my tears. Ethan came after me eventually, his breath clouding in the night. "Don't give them what they want," he muttered. His hand was warm on my shoulder, the only warmth I felt that night. That moment bonded us, or so I thought. For years, Ethan and I shared the same bitterness, the same rejection of this new family. We skipped holidays, we avoided dinners, but slowly he softened. By the time Maya was 4, he started showing up again. He brought her toys, let her sit on his shoulders, even called her kiddo. I felt betrayed all over again. Why, I demanded once, cornering him outside after a family dinner. The streetlights threw our shadows long across the driveway. "She didn't choose this, Lena," he said quietly. None of us did. His words burned like acid. I wanted to scream, to claw at him, to make him understand that acknowledging Maya felt like erasing me. But I swallowed it down like I always did. Swallowing became a habit, a survival skill. I swallowed it the night Dad forced me to sit at the same table as Clara for Easter, her perfume sweet and nauseating. I swallowed it the time Mom slipped me $20 and whispered, "Be kind to Maya. It'll mean a lot to your father." I swallowed it when Ethan laughed with Clara in the kitchen as if she hadn't been the reason our mother once knelt on the floor like a beggar. Every swallow carved me deeper. And yet, in the middle of all that bitterness, I built my escape. I discovered art. At 16, I spent hours sketching in the margins of my notebooks, shading in faces that looked nothing like mine, creating worlds where I wasn't unwanted. My teachers noticed, praised me, even submitted my work to contests. I won 1/3 place in a state competition. I remember walking through the front door with the ribbon pinned to my shirt glowing with pride. Mom was in the kitchen. Clara was there too, sipping coffee like she belonged. I opened my mouth to share the news, but Dad cut me off. Not now, Lena. Maya's taking her first steps. I stood there ribbon wilting while everyone clapped for the baby in the living room. Ethan called me later that night to congratulate me, but it didn't matter. That moment was seared into me the moment I realized that no matter what I achieved, Maya would always eclipse me in their eyes. I didn't know it back then, but that bitterness would harden into something unbreakable. By the time I was 18, the house in Brighton Hill felt like a stage where everyone played their assigned roles. Dad strutted around like the director Clara hovered in the wings, and Maya, the golden child, was always center stage. Mom clapped from the audience, desperate to keep the show going. And me, I was the stagehand no one thanked cleaning up the messes after the curtain fell. College was my escape hatch. I left Riverton City with 2 suitcases and a scholarship to an art program that barely covered tuition. But freedom had a price. Long nights waiting tables, sketching by the dim light of a diner's neon sign, saving tips in a coffee tin under my bed. Every greasy plate I carried, every rude customer I smiled through it all, meant I could stay away from that house. Still, even in my new life, the Carter family drama bled through. Mom called often, her voice trembling through static. "Your father, he's trying. Maya's doing so well in school. Can you come for Thanksgiving?" I always said no, but guilt gnawed at me. One Thanksgiving when I was 20, I finally gave in. I walked into the house carrying a pumpkin pie from the store, my poor attempt at fitting in. The kitchen smelled of roasted turkey butter and something sour underneath. Clara was there carving the turkey like it was her place, her knife scraping against the bone. Maya, now 6, bounced around the living room squealing with delight as Dad lifted her onto his shoulders. Mom hugged me tight, whispering, "Thank you for coming." Her eyes were glossy hopeful, like my presence could glue the cracks back together. But the cracks only widened. At the table, Dad raised a glass. To family, he said, his eyes sweeping over Clara, then landing on Maya. "We're stronger together." I wanted to laugh. Stronger together. My mother had aged 10 years and 5. Ethan sat stiffly, jaw clenched, his girlfriend shifting uncomfortably beside him. Clara smiled like a queen while Maya blew bubbles into her milk. I clutched my fork so hard my hand cramped. No one noticed. Later that night, after the plates were cleared, I found myself in the backyard, staring at the frozen grass. Ethan joined me, the glow from his cigarette illuminating his tired face. "You shouldn't have come," he muttered. "Yeah," I said bitterly, but Mom begged. He exhaled smoke into the cold air. "She's never gonna leave him." The silence between us was heavy, broken only by the rustle of the trees. Then he said something that cut deeper than I expected. "Maybe you should just let it go, Lena. Move on, move on." As if betrayal was a pebble you could just flick from your shoe. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper. In college, I poured that rage into my art. My professors praised my intensity, my ability to capture raw emotion on the page. They didn't know I was sketching my own wounds. One piece, a charcoal drawing of a woman standing tall, while shadows clawed at her feet, was displayed in a local gallery. It should have been a triumph. Instead, when I called Mom to share the news, she said, "That's wonderful, honey." "Oh, hold on, Maya, just won a school contest, too." "Mark, tell Lena about Maya's drawing." I hung up before Dad could brag. My victory stolen in a heartbeat. The years blurred together after that. Graduations, birthdays, holidays, I skipped most of them. Sophie came into my life during that time, a whirlwind of laughter and resilience. She was studying nursing, working double shifts, yet still found time to sit with me in my tiny apartment and listen. She became the sister I never had, the one I chose. But even with Sophie beside me, the Carter family never loosened their grip. Mom sent pictures of Maya's milestones, her first piano recital, her ballet costume, her smile with missing teeth. Each photo was a knife twisting in my chest. Not because Maya deserved hate, she was just a kid, but because every celebration of her felt like another reminder that I was expendable. When I was 24, Mom landed in the hospital with chest pains. Panic dragged me back to Brighton Hill. I remember running down sterile hallways, my sneakers squeaking against the tile, the scent of antiseptic stinging my nose. Mom lay in bed, pale but alive. Dad sat at her side, holding her hand. Clara was there too, patting Mom's arm as if she had the right. I froze in the doorway. Mom smiled weakly. "Lena, thank you for coming." But her next words gutted me. "Clara's been such a help." I wanted to scream. Help. From the woman who shattered us. Instead, I sat quietly swallowing it down. Again. That night in the hospital cafeteria, Ethan cornered me. "You can't keep blaming Maya for Dad's mistakes." He said, his voice low, almost pleading. "I don't blame her," I snapped. "I blame him. I blame Clara. But don't ask me to play big sister. I won't." He stared at me like I was heartless. Maybe I was. But what Ethan didn't understand was that every demand to accept Maya felt like erasing myself, like I was supposed to vanish so she could take my place. And then came the cruelest cut of all. On my 25th birthday, I decided stupidly to visit home. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd celebrate me for once. Mom baked a cake. The house smelled of chocolate and frosting. For a moment, I felt 12 again, before the secrets, before the fractures. But when I walked into the living room, everyone was gathered around Maya, now 11, singing happy birthday. My dad had accidentally scheduled her party the same day. They handed her the cake, the gifts, the spotlight. I stood in the doorway, my own birthday fading into nothing. Mom pressed a cupcake into my hand, later whispering, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. By the time I hit 27, I had built a life far from Brighton Hill. My apartment in Riverton City was small walls, stained with old paint, but it was mine. Mine and Sophie's. She and I made it a refuge. Candles flickering in recycled jars, thrift store art, hung crookedly late-night takeout boxes stacked by the sink. It was messy, but it was safe. Yet somehow, no matter how many miles away I ran, my family kept finding cracks to crawl through. 2 summers ago, Dad called me out of nowhere. His tone was casual, almost cheerful, like we were close. "Maya's been accepted into St. Clair Academy. You should be proud. She's following in your footsteps." Proud. The word made my throat tighten. He had never once told me he was proud of me, not when I won that art competition, not when I survived on my own. Not even when one of my illustrations landed in a local magazine. But for Maya, he used that word freely. I hung up before he finished. Sophie found me pacing my palms, sweating. "You okay?" she asked, setting down her coffee. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just family stuff." But inside, I was crumbling. The first time I met Maya again after years of distance, she was 15, taller, prettier, already walking into a room like she owned it. She came to one of our awkward family dinners, and the moment she saw me, she grinned. "Lena, I can't believe we've never bonded. We should hang out sometime." Her tone was innocent enough, but it felt rehearsed, coached, like Clara or Dad had whispered in her ear. "Make her like you. Make her responsible." I smiled stiffly, stabbing my fork into the roast chicken. "We'll see." But Maya didn't let it go. Every time I visited, rare as it was, she'd hover asking questions about my art, about Riverton, about Sophie. At first I thought she was just trying. Then I realized it was more than that. She wanted a sister. Or at least she wanted the version of me that could make her life easier. The breaking point came last fall. It was one of those suffocating family dinners in Brighton Hill. The house smelled of rosemary and lemon, the TV blaring a football game in the background. Clara was at the table, of course, her perfume too sweet Maya, sitting beside her in a neat blazer like she was auditioning for approval. Dad cleared his throat halfway through the meal. Maya's thinking about transferring to St. Clair for art. It's near Riverton. Convenient, isn't it, Lena? I froze fork halfway to my mouth. Convenient for who? For everyone. He said smoothly. She could stay with you during the week. It'll be good for her. For you, too, someone to keep you company. The room tilted. My chest tightened. I already have company, I snapped, glancing at Sophie, who joined me that night and now stared at her plate. Clara jumped in voice therapy. It would only be temporary. Maya would help with rent chores. She admires you so much. Maya looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes. And for a split second I almost wavered. Almost. But then I remembered my 16th birthday ribbon crumpled in my fist, my 25th birthday overshadowed by her cake, my mother begging on her knees. No, I said flatly. The silence was thick, broken only by the clink of Ethan's fork. Dad's jaw tightened his smirk, fading into something colder. You're being selfish, he hissed. Mom murmured, Lena, please think about it. Her voice cracked like glass. That was when I realized nothing had changed. Not in 15 years. I was still the disposable one. That night, back in Riverton, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Sophie whispered from the next room, You did the right thing. But my stomach churned with guilt and anger tangled together. I didn't know then how far they would go. Weeks later, Sophie handed me her phone, her brows furrowed. Lena. You should see this. It was a text accidentally sent to her by Clara. A long message outlining how Lena already agreed to a trial run for Maya to live with us and how we just had to be patient until she folds. My blood ran cold. They were plotting. They were setting me up. I laughed bitterly, the sound ugly in my throat. Of course, that's exactly their style. And I didn't know it yet, but that text would become my weapon later. The last flashback I can't forget happened only months before the current chaos. Mom invited me home for Easter. Against my better judgment, I went. The dining room smelled of ham and honey-glazed sunlight pouring through lace curtains. Everything looked picture perfect. Until halfway through the meal, Mom suddenly paled her hand, clutching her chest. She collapsed onto the floor, gasping. Plates shattered. Ethan knelt beside her, panicked. I rushed forward too, but Dad froze shock or guilt I couldn't tell. Clara grabbed a glass of water like that could fix it. The paramedics came, their sirens wailing into the quiet neighborhood. Mom survived. It was a panic attack, they said, but the image of her on the floor trembling haunted me. Afterward, Ethan turned on me in the hospital hallway, his eyes bloodshot. Do you see what this is doing to her? All this fighting, if you just gave in about Maya, maybe things would calm down. I stared at him, stunned. You think this is my fault? He didn't answer, and that silence cut deeper than words ever could. That was the moment I knew no matter what I did, I would always be the villain in their story. But what they didn't know was villains can fight back. The weeks after that Easter blurred together in a haze of phone calls and tension. I tried to bury myself in work sketching until my fingers cramped, taking on too many commissions. But family has a way of clawing through the cracks no matter how tightly you shut the door. It started small. Mom called one evening while I was cleaning brushes in the sink. The smell of turpentine stung my nose. Lena, honey, she whispered, her voice low, like Dad might be listening from the next room. Maya's new school is starting soon. It would mean so much if you let her stay with you just for a week. Try it out. I gripped the phone tighter. No, Mom. I already said no. Her breath hitched. But she's anxious about dorms. You remember how scary it was being alone at that age. You wouldn't want her to suffer. Guilt pricked at me sharp and familiar. I swallowed it down. I did suffer. And I survived. She can too. The silence on the other end was heavy. Then softer. You're harder than I thought, Lena. When the call ended, I stood in my kitchen staring at the dirty water swirling down the drain. Harder. That was what they always called me when I didn't bend. Mini drama 1. A week later, Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. Sophie and I were eating noodles on the couch, Netflix flickering on the wall. The knock startled us, chopsticks clattering. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, shoulders squared, eyes tired. Can we talk? I didn't want him inside my safe space, but Sophie gave me a look, be civil. So I let him in. He glanced around, taking in the messy table, the laundry basket in the corner. So this is your place? Yeah, I said flatly. What do you want? He sighed, rubbing his temples. Maya needs stability. Clara can't give it right now. Dad's too busy. Mom's fragile. You're the only option. I laughed at the sound bitter. Funny how I'm the only option when it's inconvenient for everyone else. Not when I needed help. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're punishing a kid for mistakes our parents made. I leaned forward. And you're sacrificing me to make their lives easier. Don't play the moral card with me, Ethan. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, I saw the brother I used to trust, but it flickered out fast. He left without finishing his noodles, the door slamming behind him. Another crack. Mini-drama, too. The next dinner at Brighton Hill was worse. Clara arrived in a brand-new dress, Maya trailing behind, with her sketchbook clutched like a prop. The air smelled of roasted chicken thyme and something sour resentment, maybe. Dad cleared his throat. Maya's been preparing to live in Riverton. She's excited to learn from you, Lena. I stabbed a potato with my fork. She's not living with me. Clara's lips curved in a smile too sweet. But you already agreed to try. I told her it was settled. My head snapped up. You what? Maya's eyes widened, confusion flickering across her face. Wait. You said Aunt Lena wanted me there. You said she was happy about it. Heat flushed up my neck. That's a lie. I never said that. Dad slammed his fist on the table glasses, rattling. Enough. Stop making everything difficult, Lena. Mom whispered my name, pleading. Ethan stared at his plate, and Maya looked at me like I'd just betrayed her when I'd never promised her a thing. I left before dessert. The night air outside was cold, but it couldn't cool the fire burning in my chest. Mini-drama 3. 2 nights later, I came home to Sophie pacing the living room, phone in hand. Lena? Maya showed up here, by herself. I froze, keys slipping from my fingers. What do you mean showed up? She was in the hallway crying. I didn't know what to do. I let her in. My stomach dropped. In the living room, Maya sat curled on the couch, her face blotchy from tears. I thought you wanted me here, she whispered. Mom said you did. Rage and pity tangled inside me, twisting my insides. I crouched down, voice tight. Maya, I never agreed. They lied to you. Her lip trembled. But I packed everything. Where am I supposed to go? I wanted to scream. At Clara, at Dad, at all of them. Instead, I stood fists clenched. Call your mother. Now. She refused, sobbing louder. Sophie touched my arm, gently whispering, Lena, don't yell at her. She's just a kid. But in that moment, all I could see was the manipulation, the setup. They'd dumped her on my doorstep, hoping I'd fold. Mini-drama 4. At midnight, after unanswered calls to Clara, I rang Dad. Pick her up, tonight. Or I'm calling the cops. His voice oozed irritation. Don't be dramatic. Let her stay. I'll get her tomorrow. Midnight, I hissed. Or she's waiting at the police station. There was a long pause, then a cold laugh. You've really changed, Lena. You used to be kind. The line went dead. I stood in the silence of my living room, Maya crying softly on the couch, Sophie watching me with worried eyes. And for the first time, I wondered if they would actually abandon her here, force me into their trap. The thought clawed at me as the clock ticked toward midnight. Midnight came and went. I sat on the arm of the couch, watching the second hand crawl around the clock, face my jaw aching from how tight I clenched it. Maya had cried herself into a shallow sleep, curled up under Sophie's blanket. Sophie shot me a look from across the room, half pity, half warning. At 12:30, headlights finally cut across my window. Dad's car. The slam of his door echoed like a gavel. He didn't knock gently. He pounded. I opened the door, blocking his way inside. She's asleep, I said coldly. His eyes darted past me, landing on the couch where Maya stirred. You couldn't let her rest one night. One night becomes forever, I snapped. You know exactly what you're doing. You're using her as a pawn. He smirked the same smirk I'd hated since I was 14. You think too highly of yourself. Not everything's about you, Lena. Behind me, Sophie shifted uncomfortably, arms crossed. Dad saw her and sneered. So this is who you chose over family? A roommate? I stepped forward, forcing him back into the hall. Leave. Take her. Don't come here again unannounced. His eyes flashed with something dark, anger, maybe even fear. But he turned without another word. He scooped Maya up from the couch, ignoring her sleepy protests, and carried her out. The door slammed. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My whole body shook. Sophie put a hand on my shoulder. That was brutal. Brutal, I echoed, and not over. Mini drama 5. The fallout came fast. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. Clara, how dare you traumatize Maya, Ethan? You went too far. She's just a kid. Even Mom timid as ever. Please apologize, Lena. Your father is furious. Apologize. The word tasted like ash. I ignored them, burying myself in commissions, but the storm followed me. At the next Sunday dinner, I showed up out of obligation, stomach twisted into knots. The house smelled of garlic bread and wine. Mom greeted me with forced cheer while Dad avoided my eyes. Clara sat smug at the table, Maya beside her, eyes red but defiant. Halfway through the meal, Clara dropped her bomb. Lena, I hope you've reconsidered. Maya needs stability. You know she even promised to help with bills. She's been saving her allowance. My fork froze midair. Bills. What lies had they been feeding her? Maya looked at me eagerly. I can pay my way. I want to. I'll even do laundry, whatever you need. I stared at her, my chest tightening. She actually believed she was negotiating her place in my life like a tenant. And all I saw was Clara's hand shoving her forward, using her like bait. I set my fork down, my voice sharp. No, this isn't happening. The room went silent. Dad's hand tightened on his glass. Mom whispered my name, pleading. Ethan's eyes burned with disappointment. And then Maya broke. Tears welled, spilling down her cheeks. Why do you hate me so much I didn't ask to be born? The words cut sharper than I expected. My breath hitched, but I held my ground. I don't hate you, Maya, but I won't let them use me to fix what they broke. Her sobs filled the silence, the kind of sound that makes everyone look at you like you're the monster. And maybe to them, I was. Mini drama 6. 2 weeks later, another twist. Sophie caught Maya snooping in my room when we returned from the grocery store. My sketchbooks were scattered across the bed pages, flipped through smudges of charcoal on her hands. What are you doing? I demanded, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. She stammered, I just wanted to see your art, to learn. But when Sophie pulled me aside later, she whispered, Your watch is gone, the silver one. I confronted Maya, and she swore she hadn't taken it. But the look in her eyes, guilt flickering just beneath the surface, told me otherwise. That night, I lay awake, fury and pity battling inside me. She wasn't just a victim. She was learning the same manipulative tricks her mother had mastered. And if I let her stay, I'd drown in it. Mini drama 7. The breaking point came at yet another family dinner. Mom looked worn, her hands trembling as she set the table. The air was heavy, the food untouched. Clara leaned back in her chair, sipping wine like she owned the place. Then Dad spoke, his voice sharp. This has gone on long enough. Maya is moving in with you, Lena. That's final. The words hung in the air like a verdict. I laughed, the sound cold. You think you can order me? In my own life, Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Stop making this harder than it has to be. Mom can't take the stress. She already collapsed once. Do you want that again? My chest clenched. Don't you dare put that on me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Please, Lena, please, just say yes. And that's when it happened. The pressure, the glares, the years of swallowing everything, I snapped. I pulled out my phone, sliding it across the table. Read it. On the screen was Clara's text, the one she'd accidentally sent Sophie detailing the trial run scheme. Proof they had lied, manipulated, cornered me. Clara's face went pale. Dad's jaw tightened. Ethan's mouth opened, then shut. Mom gasped, hand over her mouth. For once, the silence wasn't mine. It was theirs. I leaned back, my voice steady for the first time all night. You wanted a villain, fine. I'll be your villain. But you don't get to rewrite my life. The room froze, the weight of my words pressing down like thunder. And deep down, I knew the storm had only just begun. The night of the final confrontation burned into me like a brand. It wasn't planned, none of these things ever were. But when my father called another family dinner, I knew it wasn't just food on the table. It was a war. I drove the 3 hours to Brighton Hill in silence, Sophie's voice echoing in my head. Don't let them corner you. Keep your ground. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white as the houses blurred past. When I walked into the dining room, the smell of roast beef hit me rich and heavy. Mom fluttered nervously by the table, smoothing napkins that didn't need smoothing. Clara sat already crossing her legs, glass of wine in hand, her smirk faint. Maya was beside her shoulders, tense eyes darting like she already sensed the storm. Dad stood at the head of the table, king in his kingdom. Good, he said when I entered. Now we can settle this. I sat down without a word, my heart pounding against my ribs. Dinner began in silence, only the scrape of forks, the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Then Dad cleared his throat. Maya starts St. Clair next week. She'll move in with you tomorrow. The words dropped like a stone in water. I set my fork down carefully. No, his jaw clenched. This isn't up for debate. It always is, I said coldly. You don't own me. You never did. Maya's voice cracked. Why are you doing this? I thought maybe we could be sisters. My chest tightened, but I couldn't soften now. Because they're using you, Maya. Can't you see that Clara's wine glass hit the table with a sharp clink? Don't you dare drag her into your bitterness. She deserves better than your cold heart. I turned on her, heat flooding my face. Better, like you gave my mother better, like you gave me better when you smiled in her face while sleeping with her husband. Her smirk faltered just slightly. Dad slammed his fist on the table. Plates rattled. Mom flinched. Enough. This family is done with your tantrums. You will do as you're told. Something in me snapped. I pulled my phone from my pocket and slid it across the table. The glow lit up their stunned faces. Read it. On the screen, Clara's text, the one she'd sent Sophie by mistake, spelling out their plan to dump Maya on me for a trial run. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara's face drained of color. That's taken out of context. Sophie sitting at my side for once cut in. Context. You spelled out every step. You manipulated Maya. You manipulated Lena. Everyone at this table should see what you really are. Maya's lip trembled as she stared at her mother. You lied to me. Clara reached for her, but Maya pulled back her chair, screeching against the floor. The room erupted. Dad shouting, Mom crying, Ethan trying to play peacemaker. But all I heard was the thundering of my own pulse. For once, I wasn't the one swallowing silence. I was the one who detonated it, and I wasn't finished. I leaned forward, my voice ice. You think you can corner me? You think you can guilt me into sacrificing my life like Mom sacrificed hers? But here's the truth. If Maya sets foot in my apartment again without my permission, I'll call the police. And I'll file for a restraining order against both of you. Dad's eyes widened, stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Mom gasped. Ethan muttered my name like a warning. And Clara laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You'd ruin your family over this. I looked at her dead on. You ruined it long before I could. The words hung heavy in the room, sharper than any knife. For a moment, no one moved. The air felt electric, like a storm ready to split the sky. Then, all at once, the voices crashed over me. Mom sobbed into her hands, whispering, Please, just stop, please. Ethan leaned forward, his face tight. Lena, you don't mean that. You're just angry. I've been angry for 15 years. I cut in, my voice sharp. And you all pretended not to notice. Tonight, you notice. Dad's chair scraped back. He loomed over me, his shadow long across the table. You think you're stronger than me? You think you can tear this family apart? I rose too, my knees trembling but my voice steady. You already did. I'm just refusing to play along. The room stilled. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Then Mom gasped a sharp, broken sound and slumped sideways. Her fork clattered to the floor. Mom Ethan lunged, catching her before she hit the ground. Maya shrieked. Clara froze. I rushed around the table, heart pounding, while Sophie was already pulling out her phone. Call an ambulance, she ordered, voice crisp. The chaos blurred, Dad yelling her name, Ethan trying to rouse her, Maya crying into her hands. But in the middle of it, I felt a cold clarity. This was what years of silence and swallowing had done to her. She had begged, bent broken, and now her body was giving out. The paramedics arrived, their voices calm against the storm. They carried Mom out on a stretcher oxygen mask over her pale face. Ethan followed pale himself. Clara hovered, wringing her hands. I stood in the doorway, my breath ragged, watching the ambulance lights fade into the dark. My father turned, then eyes blazing, his voice a growl. "This is your fault!" The words hit like a blow. But instead of crumbling, I straightened. My chest ached, but my voice was steady. "No, this is yours. And hers." I glanced at Clara, whose face twisted with something between rage and fear. Maya's voice cracked from the corner. "Dad, is it true? Did you tell Mom she had to stay with you no matter what?" The silence that followed was deafening. Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Clara shifted, biting her lip, and for the first time, Maya looked at them not with hope, but with disgust. She whispered, "You've ruined everything." Then she bolted up the stairs, slamming her door. The house fell into a brittle silence. I grabbed my coat, my hands shaking. Sophie touched my arm. "Lena," but I shook my head. "I'm done." I walked out into the night, the air sharp and cold against my skin. The stars above blurred with unshed tears, but my steps didn't falter. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking away in silence, I was walking away with power. Behind me, the house sat like a crumbling monument to everything I'd endured. Inside, they would spin their stories, point their fingers, craft me as the villain. Let them. Because what they didn't know was that tonight had given me my weapon, proof of their lies, proof of their manipulation. And I wasn't afraid to use it. I didn't go back to Brighton Hill after that night. The ambulance lights burned into my memory, strobing red and white across my father's face, across Clara's frozen smile. But it wasn't my mother's pale skin that haunted me most. It was the way he pointed at me, snarling, that this was all my fault. For years, he'd used silence and shame to control me. That night, he tried one last time to bury me under guilt. And for the first time, it didn't work. I drove home with Sophie beside me, the city lights of Riverton rising like a promise ahead. She kept glancing over her lips, pressed tight, but she didn't speak until we pulled into our cracked driveway. "You know they'll come after you harder now." "I know," I whispered. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from clarity. And I'm ready. The days that followed were a blur of messages I didn't answer. Ethan texted me paragraphs about thinking of Mom, begging me to apologize to Dad, to Maya, to everyone. Clara sent venom, thinly disguised as pity. "You're so bitter, Lena. You'll regret this when you're alone." Even Dad called, leaving a single message in that cold voice of his. This isn't over. He was right. It wasn't. I sat at my kitchen table one night, the glow of my laptop washing over the evidence on my screen. Clara's text, her mistake. Proof of manipulation. Sophie leaned over my shoulder, her eyes scanning the words. "You could take this to court," she murmured. "Not yet." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "First, I need them to know I have it. Let them sweat." Because what they didn't realize was that every scheme, every lie had handed me the one thing I'd never had before: leverage. Meanwhile, Maya tried to reach out. A shaky call late at night, her voice small. I didn't know Lena. I thought you hated me. I didn't know Mom lied. Her words cut, but they also shifted something. For the first time, she wasn't just a pawn in their hands, she was a casualty. Part of me wanted to soften. Another part remembered the watch she'd taken the snooping. The tears turned weapon when it suited her. She wasn't innocent, not completely, but she wasn't my enemy either. Not yet. I told her quietly, "You want the truth. Stop letting them speak for you. Then maybe we can talk." She sniffled, whispered a shaky, "Okay," and hung up. The line went dead, but the echo stayed. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the city hum outside my window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. Because I wasn't just the forgotten daughter anymore. I wasn't the stagehand cleaning up their mess. I was the one holding the script now. And the ending, that was mine to write. I thought of Mom fragile in that hospital bed. I thought of Ethan too blind to see he'd become Dad's echo. I thought of Clara, her lies unraveling, her debts crushing in. And Dad, the man who once smirked like a king, now scrambling to control a story he no longer owned. They still believed they could bend me, but what they didn't know was that the moment they tried to destroy me, they handed me the weapon I'd been waiting for, and I was done swallowing. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, then you know how deep those scars can cut. My story isn't finished, it's only the beginning. I've drawn my line in the sand, and sooner or later they'll realize I'm not the one they can break anymore. So stay with me, because the next chapter will show just how far I'm willing to go to protect my life, my freedom, and my truth. Subscribe, share this story, and tell me, have you ever had to choose between blood and peace?